discussion. So as I would have said at the beginning, this afternoon, we really want to take you through a journey to holistically understand deep sea mining. So Dr. Amon would have kind of given us an introduction, into the science of deep sea mining. And you have seen Mr. Gianni kind of gave us, the understanding of the mechanisms of how this industry will be established and operate. So now to help you as media practitioners better understand just how to communicate this effectively to your audiences, we are very happy to have Ms. Khadija Stewart with us this afternoon, and she's also representing our partner organization for this webinar, the same Sustainable Ocean Alliance. So Ms. Khadija Stewart is an ocean and climate specialist from Trinidad and Tobago, using innovative storytelling as a catalyst to raise awareness and mobilize behavior change throughout her environmental journey. She has represented Trinidad and Tobago at the 8th World Water Forum with the World Youth Parliament for Water in 2018, at the Peace Boat Ocean and Climate Youth Ambassador Program in 2019, at the Our Ocean Youth Leadership Summit in Oslo, and the UN Ocean Conference in 2022, and the Our Ocean Conference in Panama 2023. She is also the founder of EcoVibes Environmental Creatives, and she holds an MSc in Climate Change and Development from the SOAS University of London. So I'm now giving Ms. Khadija Stewart the opportunity. Yes, the opportunity to present.
Thank you so much, Terrell. That bio sounds amazing. I've been working hard, so happy to be here to present and share on deep sea mining, making sure you guys are seeing my screen. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So this is my little friend. I named him Robert. And today, as Terrell mentioned, I am Khadija Stewart, the Caribbean Regional Representative at Sustainable Ocean Alliance. And I've been working on deep sea mining for just over a year now, as SOA is part of the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition. And they've been doing a ton of work on raising awareness and really getting youth involved in the process. And that is where I come in as one of their youth leaders. Right, and I just have this little quote here for you guys from Dr. Sylvia Earle, and I hope for your help to explore and protect the wild ocean in ways that will restore the health and in so doing secure hope for humankind. Health to the ocean means health for us. Right, and as journalists and storytellers, because we are all storytellers in any form or fashion, you have the power to spread awareness and information, and it is up to you guys to do that in the right capacity, which is why we are here today, right? And just a brief background, Sustainable Ocean Alliance, like I mentioned, has been doing a lot in raising awareness on the topic and using all sorts of different media tools or avenues, channels to really get the public involved on the topic. So as you can see, we have a lovely Defend the Deep. That was a mural painted in Lisbon at the UN Ocean Conference. We had the Look Down campaign in France, SOA Ecuador. They contacted social media influencers and got them to make a ton of posts. There were demonstrations in Canada. We had art taking place. There were documentaries created, interviews with different deep sea specialists, etc., sessions with politicians, governments, you name it, to really get the word out there and to get people engaged in the topic as much as possible. And here in the Caribbean, we've also had some action taking place to get youth involved, as well as to raise awareness and educate people on the topic. So with SOA Caribbean, we use art as the main tool, and we had an art exhibition in January. It was very lovely. Some of you all were present, really to connect people to the deep ocean, because like a lot of Caribbean people, for some reason, don't like the ocean, don't go swimming, etc. So to tell them about all these different things happening, it's completely out of sight, out of mind. So, but everybody loves a pretty picture, or at least I do. Maybe I'm a child, but for the most part, everybody loves a pretty painting, etc. So we really use that to connect people to the ocean and for them to, feel something, some kind of emotion, and understand why it's important, what the ocean has to offer, and why we should protect it. In Jamaica, we had the Jamaica Climate Change Youth I can't remember the exact acronyms. Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council, yes. And Davia is on the call right now. So Davia, I got it right. Yeah, so they have been doing demonstrations. They had an event, Deep Sea Matters, where they had different stakeholders come together. So UNEP, some of our SOA Caribbean members, really spreading awareness. The picture you can see that was at Earth Hour. They had an Earth Hour festival in Jamaica during the last ISA meeting. And we were there raising awareness, radio interviews, TV interviews, you name it, just really trying to connect the media as much as possible to the topic. And right, so the ISA, as Matt would have, sorry, Mr. Gianni, so would have mentioned, you know, we got a very detailed introduction to the International Seabed Authority, and these meetings are taking place right here in our region in Jamaica. And for the most part, I know that you're able to log in and follow these sessions, but if you're not familiar with the topic or anything like that, then you're logging in and everything that's happening is going in one ear out the next, right? Or they would love for the opportunity to have more observers, more delegates present, but for the most part, you know, that's not happening. So a lot of us aren't in the room. So a lot of us don't really have an idea of what is going on, right? And as you would have, well, I don't know if you were able to get it, but the ISA is like an onion with so many different layers that is extremely detailed. And a lot of journalistic blocks take place within the ISA as well. And at the last meeting, we were trying to record different interventions that were taking place, and they were like, no, don't record, you're not allowed to. And then we kept asking, where's the policy that say we can't record to be able to connect people to the space, to connect people to what was happening inside, and could not be found, right? But it was just all these different ways that, or different things that they do to make sure that the information is not, doesn't reach the public, because once the public get a hold of a problem, an environmental crisis, then, you know, they're going to kick up a fuss, and they don't want that, right? So now more than ever, we really need for journalists like you guys to be communicating the topic, especially in a language that people can understand and connect it. So communicating on deep sea mining. And like I mentioned, we need all of you, as well, those who work in traditional media, as well as non-traditional media, social media, anything at all to play a part, because this topic, like I said, is very important, and it is happening once again in our backyard, right? And there are a lot of different elements that we need to understand when it comes to reporting on deep sea mining. Now, I know as journalists, most of you all know these things already, but really want to tailor it specifically to deep sea mining. And this brings me to the first point, which is the topic, and really getting that comprehensive idea of the topic and the different layers involved. And then for you, when creating your stories or articles, etc., really choosing a focus point, your niche, because there are a lot of different moving parts. The ISA itself, the 2-year rules, the impact of deep sea mining, deep sea biology, why we need to protect the deep sea. You know, there's a lot of different things happening. And if you write all of that in one big article, chances are halfway through, you might lose the audience, right? So if it's a whole community of you guys reporting on the topic, then somebody could choose the deep sea biology, somebody could choose the science, somebody could choose the ISA, and really have all these different points where enough attention is being paid so that we could really get the content out there in a way that is digestible and necessary. And then that brings me to research. Now, it's very important that we have to do research, especially on this topic. And I know there are a lot of scientific papers out there. And for the most part, some of them could be beyond confusing, but there are also podcasts, documentaries, all these different sources. But at the same time, you definitely need to be wary of the sources and the writers. You know, recently, TMC put out an article, this is the Metals Company, stating that basically it's no longer argument, it's no longer conversation, mining is happening, they're going to get approval in July, and everybody was just like, what? How could they say this? Why are they saying this? And there were so many other people that ran with that story as like, this is a fact, oh my God, this is happening, what? And without taking the time to take a step back and realize what was TMC's motive for releasing an article like that. And, really taking the time to do the research, as well as the information is always constantly changing. I find myself, but I tell you all, I read on this topic like every 2 days, every day, every week. Things are always changing, progressing, growing. There's always new papers coming out. There's always new arguments being put into the debate, different things happening, so it's always changing, and it's always important to be on top of it, because you might be reporting on something that says, hey, maybe, and this is an example, this is not a fact, just making sure I clarify, right? 22 exploration licenses were given out, and that could have been something that was said last week, and then this week they reached like 35, you know what I mean? So it's important, again, that was an example, that's not a fact, right? So it's important to be on track and to be on the information that is being put out. And then the audience. Oh my gosh, understanding the audience, which is also a very big thing when communicating any topic at all. And I think for a topic like deep sea mining, we have like 3 key audiences, which is like your politicians, environmentalists, and then the general public, right? Because we want the politicians to be involved in the topic. We want them to be the ones saying, hey, we need a moratorium, a precautionary pause, etc. But how do we communicate that to them? What do politicians understand? Dollars and cents, money. So, tailoring your message to that. And what do they also want? They want to look good. If you give a politician an opportunity to look good, they would run at it, as well as an opportunity for them to secure votes, any form or fashion, so tailoring your message to that, or your article to that audience will be also important, taking those things into mind. And environmentalists, what do they care about? Saving the earth. So if you're writing to them in mind on the topic of deep sea mining, your chances are you'll focus on the impacts. Chances are you'll focus on why we need the ocean, what is happening, and connect it to all these different things, because that's the audience. That's what they want to hear about. That's what they would connect to the most. So that's, the direction your messaging should go towards. And then there's the general public. And what does the general public care about? Themselves at the end of the day, if you're being quite honest, right? So their first question always will be, how does this affect me, right? Because like I said, the deep sea is something completely out of sight, out of mind. So we have to find ways when reporting on it, if the audience is the general public, to connect it to their realities more than anything else, as well as in a way for them to understand. So if it is we talk about deep sea mining and the impact, chances are they're going to be like, okay, cool, this is interesting. But, most of them have seen land mining or quarrying. They know what happens when we have heavy rainfall and a quarry has been abandoned and there's flooding and there's siltation of the rivers, etc. So, tie it back to something that they could already relate to make it easier for them to understand the topic at hand. And then there is the language. So I'm sure, as you realize, DSM, deep sea mining, is very technical, and it is very easy, especially for us who have been working in the field, to get lost in the jargon, and the jargon is very heavy, and we are accustomed to it, right? So, for example, if an accountant is talking to me about financial statements or something like that, the way I would blank out immediately, because accounting is just nothing to do with me or my field, and from the time you start balance sheet, etc., you've lost me, right? But if they're talking to their friends, they're other accountants, they're speaking the language that they know, that they're accustomed to, and that's the same thing with us as scientists or experts in this field, as well as with you guys communicating the topic to the public, right? And there's also, like I mentioned, in research, the need for evidence-based writing, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's very easy to get caught up in sharing that misinformation. So really need to pay attention to that, as well as sometimes with some of these articles, especially on the more technical side, it could seem like the way it's being written is kind of talking down to people, and they might feel like, okay, everything in this is above me, so I don't need to read this, I can't connect with this, etc. So it's not a matter of dumbing it down, but just a matter of, again, relaying the information in a way that they could understand and connect to. And always remember that it is a conversation and not an argument. Usually when somebody starts attacking, our initial response as humans is to block or be on the defense, right? And if it is you're trying to have a conversation, you're trying to communicate this with somebody, then you need to be, you could be somewhat attacking, but not like, you need to do better, you're horrible, you're killing us, you're killing the ocean, you're killing the planet. But then, I mean, by that time, if somebody start talking to me like that, I'm walking away, right? So yeah, just be wary of the language and how we communicate that moving forward, as well as, and this was a very interesting point that I came across and I felt like I really needed to share it, but most people, I gotta go back. Right. Most people, when you're talking to them, especially with things related to climate change or environmental problems and stuff like that, they tend to understand risk and not really uncertainty. So for example, people who in health, we understand health risk, we understand insurance risk, we understand financial risk, national security risk. So depending on your audience, whether it be a politician, a business person, etc., you could use that language to communicate to them. And an example of this in action would be the fact that deep sea mining was supposed to take place in Papua New Guinea in their national waters, and they lost $157 million, right? So that is a financial risk that somebody could, relate to, especially a politician, government, etc., and be on the path to making a more informed decision. And then lastly, messaging. When you look at your messaging, we really need to make sure that it is hopeful and not doom and gloom. Not the world is going to the end. We're gonna, especially since the last IPCC report came out, that is really painting a terrible picture of our reality in the future. It could become a state where it becomes so out of touch and so negative that you don't feel to do anything, because it's almost like, okay, well, the ocean is gonna die, we're all gonna die, so I have no hope, so I'm not gonna do anything moving forward, because what's the point, right? And we really don't want that to come across in what it is we're communicating. So hopeful messaging is always important, as well as to be clear about the scientific consensus. Dr. Diva would have presented a lot of that, and it's very clear, the science is out there, and making sure that we use the science as well as evidence-based reporting in creating stories or anything like that towards raising awareness. And then the next thing that I mentioned before that people love is pictures, pretty pictures, pretty videos, etc. So it's always key to use images, use stories, as well as create visuals to people. So I don't know if you remembered in Dr. Almond's presentation, she was talking about the size of the impact and related it to it being the size of France, Germany, Belgium, etc. You're like, wow, okay, those are big countries, that's a big area. And that's something that people could connect with, or you're telling them about the deep sea and it's just like 200 meters and more, and it's just like, okay, but I can't picture what 200 meters looks like. But if you say something like 1,000 Eiffel Towers or something like that, people have a visual of what the Eiffel Tower looks like, how tall that is, and I'm like, oh, okay, wow, that's pretty long, that's very deep, and it's easier for them to connect to something like that. And yeah. And then the next thing is clickbait. A lot of times, clickbait versus reality versus connectivity. A lot of times when we're reporting on different things, how do we choose the balance between a catchy topic, actually reporting on the truth, as well as being able to get people to connect it? And some examples of clickbait stuff that I personally don't like would be things like raping the deep sea for money. That's a little intense. That kind of language could be a little harsh, and for somebody who unfortunately is a victim of something like that could see it and be like, this is a no, right? So, but again, the idea is to get people attention as much as possible with doing things like that. But at the same time, you end up losing so much more when you're heavily focused on creating a outlandish title for clickbait purposes, right? And then there are things like race to mine the deep sea, mining the ocean floor, green lighting and marine biodiversity collapse, etc. So again, finding the balance between clickbait, reality, and connectivity. And then there's conducting the interviews. So there's so much of us, again, who are working in this field, who have had, myself especially, from the time the year started, I did an interview on TV in Trinidad and then went to Jamaica, did a next interview there. So, there are people, more and more people getting involved in the topic and wanting to report on it. And for you guys as journalists, I think it's extremely important for you all to be conducting interviews. And in conducting these interviews, these are some of the things I need to, for you all to be focused on. And this is things like blanket statements, because there are a lot of governments, a lot of people out there making blanket statements. So for one of them, for example, would be like, no deep sea mining will begin until strict environmental regulations are in place, et cetera, et cetera. Now, most countries say this inside the ISA meeting, but if it is, you take that, you might be like, oh, okay, well, this is a great statement. And, you run with it as a headline, but we need more than that from them than just that, because that's something that they've been saying over and over and over and over and over again. Literally every meeting I've been to, I've been hearing that statement at least 20 times, right? And that is just enough information for the public to not kick up a storm or make fuss about the topic when there's so much more happening behind the scenes. So we really need to get deeper with the questioning. So example, without baseline data, how are you going to ensure robust environmental regulations, or something along those lines of questioning. And then there's the idea, when you also interview some of the people, they say things like, deep sea mining is not going to occur here. So there's no need for us to be worried, right? And there's definitely a need for us to be worried. And when you get responses like that, again, you need to pry and push more and be like, okay, well, how would you feel responsible for greenlighting an industry that would cause irreversible impacts, etc. And we would be impacted, even if you don't think that it's going to be direct right now. So really making sure and drill down on the line of questioning when it comes to professionals, not professionals, politicians and leaders who are taking a stance or not taking a stance on the topic. Next thing they like to say is we need the minerals for the green revolution. Mr. Gianni presented on that already and said, that is definitely not the case, but that is still something that a lot of people are pushing for and communicating. So as you guys are reporting on it, how do you push back, etc. And again, it's extremely important to make sure you streamline the conversation, as well as always bring it back to why should people care. And remember, it's a conversation and not an argument. So these are some of the key messaging that I think we really need to be pushing, especially since July is right around the corner. And the first one, we don't need deep sea minerals for a green revolution. We definitely need a moratorium or a precautionary pause. We need Caribbean leaders to take a stance. We need Caribbean leaders to attend the ISA meetings. At present, we really only have Jamaica, Trinidad, Dominican Republic attending these meetings. I have not seen anyone else. Dr. Amon, as well as Mr. Gianni, you could correct me, but I feel like Trinidad and Jamaica are the two most prominent ones that are always in attendance. Also, right, the deep sea is one of our biggest allies against climate change. We need to protect the deep sea, reform the International Seabed Authority that was presented previously, and then the impacts of deep sea mining, it knows no boundaries and are irreversible. Right, and then as always with everything, we always need to end with a call to action, because we can't present people with all this information and then be like, okay, bye. They will be like, what do I do with this? So there are petitions out there. Make sure and share, let them know that they could write letters, let them know that they could hold demonstrations, they could do research. They could join, I didn't put this one there, but they could join existing campaigns, they could request meetings with governments, they could raise awareness, and most importantly, they could definitely get creative. Because like I said, we need everyone to be involved in this process, traditional media, non-traditional media, and any way possible to get the information out there. And as you would have heard before, you know, the wave of resistance continues to grow. In June 2022, something like a precautionary pause or moratorium was not so hot on the scene, only 3 countries, and now we all the way up to 14, and momentum is pushing, and chances are we might have more in July if we able to really get the information out there and connect to our leaders as much as possible. And on that note, that is it. I hope I give you guys enough tools to be able to go out there and effectively communicate on deep sea mining. And this is my other friend. The first one was Robert. I feel like this one could be, let's name this one Susan. Let's all work together to defend the deep. Thank you so much.
Susan is quite a beauty. Why would you not? All right, so thank you so much. I'm sure participants would have, thoroughly enjoyed